Hi and welcome. In this video, we will learn how to trace or capture deadlock information and how to avoid or minimize or prevent deadlocks in SQL Server. First, we'll see about capturing deadlocks in SQL Server. I am going to show you three methods: SQL Server Error Log, SQL Server Profiler, and Extended Events. Using these three methods, we can capture deadlock information. Before we proceed into this video, I have already made two videos about deadlock. What is a deadlock, how do they occur, and what is a deadlock priority, and how SQL Server choose a deadlock victim. If you haven't watched these videos, I will leave a link in the description. You can watch it from there. It is very important to know how many deadlocks are occurred in a day or since the server has startup. I have a SQL Server script that shows the number of deadlocks that has been reported in a day or since the server startup. So this is taking tempdb database because tempdb is recreated each time the server is restarted. So execution is completed. There are no deadlocks that has been reported since the startup. Let me create a deadlock and check this report again. So now a deadlock will arise. You can see the transaction 1 has been chosen as a deadlock victim, which is running in session ID 51. Now let's check this report. One deadlock has occurred. Let me create the deadlock again. Let me roll back this transaction. Now I am creating the deadlock again. Again the deadlock has occurred. Now let's check this report. Two deadlocks recorded since startup. How these deadlocks can be captured or identified. First we will look into SQL Server error log. We have to enable two trace flags to write deadlock information into the SQL Server error log. By default, these trace flags are not enabled. They are in disabled mode. If these are not enabled, SQL Server will not write any deadlock information into error log. If you see here, we have two deadlocks that has been recorded. Let's check in SQL Server error log whether this has been written to the error log or not. You can see there is no information about deadlock that has been recorded in the log because I have not enabled those two trace flags. So first we need to enable this before the occurrence of deadlock, and that information will be written into the error log. The trace flag 1204 list information by node. It will give you information about process and resource when a deadlock is occurred. And trace flag 1222 gives the information about the deadlocks in a XML format. It has three sections that declares a deadlock victim, and another section describes each process that is involved in the deadlock, and the third section describes the resources that are synonymous with the nodes in trace flag 1204. So how do we enable these trace flags? We have to use DBCC statement, DBCC TRACEON, mention the trace flag number and -1. Let's switch to SSMS. Now these trace flags has been enabled in SQL Server, and SQL Server will start writing the deadlock information into error log. As I already told, these trace flags are not enabled by default. We have to use this statement and turn on the trace flags. For suppose if SQL Server is restarted, this will be going to disable state again. In order to make this trace flag to turn on, you can add these trace flags into the SQL Server startup parameters, so that even if SQL Server is restarted, these trace flags will be on. We have already enabled the trace flags. Now let's check the deadlock. Let me execute the statements in order to cause the deadlock. deadlock has occurred. Now let's check the SQL Server error log. Let's see what information has been written to the deadlock error log. You can see we can find the deadlock information here. It also records the trace flags that we have turned on, and you can see deadlock encountered, printing deadlock information. So if you scroll up, you will have the information about the deadlocks. So what you have to infer from these logs is the deadlock list, the process list, and the resource list. There are three sections which I mentioned now. You have to concentrate on. First is deadlock list. This contains the information about the process that has been chosen as a deadlock victim and killed by the SQL Server. You can see this process ID has been chosen as a deadlock victim. Next is the process list. This list contains the information about the processes that are participated in the deadlock. You can see here. Let me copy this. You can see what all information you can capture from here. It will give you the host name, the login name, the SPID, isolation level, user transaction, start time, and what is the lock mode. And this is for the process ID ending with 468. The same information you can get it for the another process ID ending with C28. And next is the resource list. This provides information which is helpful to understand what exactly caused the deadlock. What is the reason for deadlock occurrence? It contains the owner list, which tells you the ID of the owner process and the lock mode it has acquired on the resource. And the waiter list, it contains the ID of the process that wants to acquire a lock on the resource. And the lock mode, it is requesting. You can also check the information about the database name, schema name, and the table name, and the associated lock, which is an exclusive lock, along with the associated object ID. So this way we have to interpret the deadlock information that is written into the SQL Server error log. Second one is SQL Server Profiler. Using SQL Server Profiler, you can create a trace that records and displays deadlock events for analysis. This works without the trace flags being turned on, and there are three events that we are going to capture here for deadlocks. It presents a graphical depiction of the tasks and resources that are involved in the deadlock. By looking at this deadlock graph, one can quickly get the basic information of deadlocks. There are three sections here: resource nodes, process nodes, and edges. The key rectangles here are the resource nodes that display information of the objects which are involved in the deadlock, such as tables, indexes, or rows. These ovals are the process nodes that display information about the process which is performing the data modification. The oval with the blue cross is a deadlock victim. The arrow marks here are the edges, which indicates the relationship between the process nodes and resource nodes. There are two types of edges here: request edge that occurs when a process waits for a resource, and the owner edge that occurs when a resource waits for a process. The lock mode is also included in the edge description. Please note that this deadlock can impact performance as it will use additional resources to collect and provide deadlock information to the user. If you want more information about analyzing deadlocks with SQL Server Profiler, I am leaving a link in the description. This one, you can take it from there. Okay. Let us quickly jump into SSMS and see the demo on how to generate a deadlock graph. Go to Tools, SQL Server Profiler, connect to your instance, and you get Trace Properties dialog box where you have to give the trace name and use the template. You can use the standard one, and if you want to save this trace file, you can save it to your local drive, and you can set the maximum file size for the trace file. Now it's just 5 MB, and then go to Event Selection tab Here you have to select log section. It is not displaying here. I need to do show all events. Here I have log section. Expand this log section and you can see log deadlock and log deadlock chain and a deadlock graph. Once I check this tick box, I'll get events extraction settings here. Go to that and you can save the XML plan or a XML file here. And okay, and going back to event selection pane, suppose if you want to filter it based on database, you can just go to show all columns and then column filters. Here you have a database ID and then select equal to, get the database ID from your SSMS. Just execute, select star from sys.databases and you get the database ID. Right now I am not using any filters for this demo purpose, so I am not giving anything here. So I am just running the trace. Just click on run. The trace is running now. Let me go back to SSMS and create a deadlock situation. And we see now a deadlock will occur in one of the transaction. See transaction 52 or sorry transaction 1 running in session ID 52 is chosen as a deadlock victim. So this information will be logged in profiler. Now going back to the trace, you can see the deadlock information has been recorded here. Just click on deadlock graph. You can see the process nodes, resource nodes and the edges here, that is representing the deadlock information. The oval with blue cross is the deadlock victim, and if you see inside this oval you have the process ID, SP ID, the deadlock priority and owner ID, server batch ID, log used and transaction description. And if you see these key rectangles which are our resource nodes, you will have the object names here, the database name, the schema name and the table name. And we have edges that indicates the relationship between the process nodes and resource nodes along with the log mode description here. If you want to know the queries involved in this deadlock, you just scroll your mouse on this oval shape and you can see what statement was being executed by the task. If you want to see the script, entire script, you just go to file, export, extract SQL Server events and then extract transact SQL events and save this file. If I open this, I would be having the transactions that are involved in this deadlock. It is the sequence of transactions that I have executed here. Next we have extended events. Till SQL Server 2008, we have used SQL Server Profiler trace, but from 2012 onwards, we are using extended events. Using these events, we can easily collect information from complex queries to simple queries and we can easily diagnose them. Let us look into the demo. Here is my server. Under management, we have extended events. You can expand extended events and in the sessions, you can see the extended event session that has been already created. So right click on sessions and start new session. Give some name here and from the template you can leave it as it is and you can select this schedule. Start the event at server startup and go to events. Under events, search for deadlock and you can see I have two events that I need to collect. If you click on one event, you will get the description here. You can read the description. So log deadlock occurs when an attempt to acquire a lock is cancelled for a victim of a deadlock. And log deadlock chain occurs when an attempt to acquire a lock generates a deadlock. This event is raised for each participant in the deadlock. So in case of simple deadlock where two sessions are involved, you can just capture these two events. In case of complex queries or more than two sessions involved in a deadlock, you can use this event XML underscore deadlock report. And to capture SQL text, you can just click on configure, scroll down, you will have SQL text. And go to data storage. If you want to store this events file, you can just click on add and browse the location where you want to save this file. And here you can give the maximum file size 1 GB or whatever you want. And in the advanced tab, I'm keeping these options as it is and I'm clicking on OK. Now you can see our extended event has been created, but it's not yet started. To start this extended event, right click on it and click on start session. You can see here the extended event session is now started. The green color indicates the session is currently running. Okay. Right click on this extended event and click on watch live data. Now create a deadlock. Once a deadlock is created, you can go back to extended event session and it displays the deadlock information here. We can see our session ID 52 is chosen as a deadlock victim. Going back to extended event live data, you can see there are 4 events that has been captured. So what you have to infer from this captured information? The first two indicates there are 2 processes that are involved in this deadlock. If you click on the first event and scroll down, you will have the session ID that is involved in this deadlock. Similarly, if you select the second one, you will have the second session ID which is 54 along with the transaction ID of the transaction. And the third session indicates deadlock victim. This event, the third event indicates a deadlock victim. You can see the transaction ID 380190 is chosen as a deadlock victim. So how to get this transaction ID information? You just check the first or second event, you will get the transaction ID. Compare it with the transaction ID. This is not the transaction ID. If you select the first one, you will have that the same transaction ID, which means session ID 52 is chosen as a deadlock victim, as we are matching it with the transaction ID. And the next event is XML deadlock report. Here we have 2 sections, details and deadlock. This deadlock we have already discussed, where we have the process nodes, resource nodes and the edges. Now I'm not going to discuss it again. So let's check the details section where you will have the XML report. Just double click on this value tab and you will get the additional information about the deadlock. Here you will have 3 sections. You will have the victim list with this process ID. Process ID ending with 088 is a victim. So in this process list, you will find this same process ID And to know the SPID, you can just check in the same process ID. You can see SPID 52 is chosen as a deadlock victim. And you'll have more additional info, database name, the client, the last batch completed date, okay, and so on. And you'll have the details of another process ID. You can see this is another process ID, and same way you'll get the process ID information like login name, session ID, transaction start date, application name, and so on. And the third section, you'll have the resource list. In resource list, as we already discussed in SQL Server error log, where we collect information from trace flags, we'll have same similar kind of thing like we'll have owner list and waiter list under resource list. Okay. You can also capture this deadlock information using system health extended events. This will be running in the background along with deadlock information. It also picks so much of information, so you have to use filter, and you have to capture that deadlock information. I mean, it's already captured, you have to filter and you want to get the data. And it's not guaranteed that you will be getting the information, I mean the information that we have captured using our customized extended event, you may not get here because the file may get overruled because it does not contain history for all the time. So if you want to check out more about that, I am leaving you a link in the description. This social tech documentation, you can check it from there. So where it talks about how to capture the data, how to use the filter, and there are some SQL scripts that you have to run. Okay, I'm not discussing this in this video. Okay, you can just check it from the video description. This is self-explanatory one. Next is minimizing deadlocks. These are the few points you need to remember in order to minimize deadlocks. Accessing objects in the same order, keep the transactions short in one batch, and log the resources for a minimum duration. Use lower isolation levels, and so on. So minimizing deadlocks can increase transaction throughput and also reduce system overhead. These are not just my recommendation; these are recommendations from Microsoft. There are few other ways that Microsoft recommends. You just go through these documents that I'll be sharing in the video description. So how to minimize deadlocks. Okay, there are two documents that I'll be sharing under this video description. Just go through this documentation. So that's all in this video. I hope you have understood this demo that is discussed in this video and clear with the concept. If you like the video, please do like, share and subscribe for more videos. Thank you for watching.